Senzo Meyiwa trial. There's a lot going on there at the moment. Timothy Matabula is one of the police officers cross-examined at the Meyiwa murder trial today. Matabula was with Umlungisi Mtatwa when they responded to the incident at the Kumalo house all those years ago. The background, the two, together with two constable students, were the first officers on the scene. So let's try and unpack and just make sense for us non-legal experts and legal eagles as to why this is so very important. Legal expert Elton Hart, who is always so willing to make time for us here on ENC. Hello to you, Elton. Good to have you back with us. And I was catching the last hour or so, and what I was hearing is just detail going into the minutiae of the photos taken on the night. It sounded to me, and please correct me, that's why I'm glad I'm talking to you, just essentially getting this on record that all the photos, all the documents are there and what they actually are. I mean, that was the essence of what I was getting in the last hour or so.
Indeed, so Garrett, that is indeed what the photo album or the photo specialist, the photographer, the crime scene investigator primarily does. They come, they capture the crime scene as they find it after a crime has been committed. But we have already heard in previous testimonies, it seems that the defense is sort of half hammering on the point that there was tampering with the crime scene. And I think now what Advocate Beloy is trying to do is to show and to bring to the court's attention to say, listen here, there was no tampering. This is how I found it. And Mtetwa and Matabula testified. They came to the crime scene, they saw certain things, they went to the hospital and they found it in the exact same state compared to what the defense is trying to say that it was not, because there's the two Ngobeni ladies that will be testifying, or they might be called, that says they found Mapiri busy cleaning. They found Ngumalo, Kumalo's uncle alone at the house. So they're trying to now, and the state is trying to now sort of do damage control to say there was no tampering, while the defense is doing a very good job to try and indicate and illustrate to court there was tampering with the evidence. The crime scene was sort of cleaned up so that we cannot really get from the crime scene what really transpired on that fateful night.
How do we, or I suppose, how does the defense or the prosecution try and argue their point, though? Because, and again, I always seem to think back, and Elton, you know, I've referred to the Oscar Pistorius trial before when I was covering that many, many years ago with many high-profile journalists, and we were getting into that part of that court case where the photo evidence was being introduced. And this can take a very long time, going backwards and forwards, trying to prove either it was changed, it was manipulated, it was contaminated, or it wasn't, because what you're seeing is a photo that's being entered into evidence, and you're trying to argue the fact that this isn't actually what it looked like before the photo was taken. I mean, as an expert, how do you even try and prove your point in a case like this?
No, indeed. If you look at the photo, you cannot say at the time that the photo was taken, it was not what was in front of the camera lens. That is what it is.
Exactly.
You need to come and bring an alternative photo to show that this is a photo that was maybe taken 10 minutes before that or an hour before that, and it was different. And maybe you could have gotten that photos from the people that was in the house. We know when people are normally together, they take photos for Instagram, social media, and all these platforms. And maybe when the analysts were actually looking at the cell phone data, what's on the cell phones, they were supposed to look at, did the phones actually take photos on that night to say, okay, there were so many bottles of alcohol involved, there was these people that was in the house, all those things, and the defense need to use those things. The only thing is that we have witnesses that testified they found the crime scene in a specific way. There is witnesses that made statements that they found certain other people that was busy cleaning up the scene. And when they come and testify, then you have these mutually destructive versions. And that's the only thing. You cannot argue what you see on the photo, because that's what they took a picture of, unless you say that the forensic experts actually cleaned the scene, then took photos, and then submit that photos as how they found the crime scene, which is a long shot. But the photos as it is will stand that is what it depicts, but we cannot rule out that you'll have other witnesses that say, we saw Mapiri washing off blood from the floor or cleaning up beer bottles. That is still when we see the Ngobenis coming to testify, either for the state or on the behalf of the defense, that might be sort of have another spanner in the works, or it might clear up what is currently being contested between defense and state at this point in time.
Yeah, and I understand, of course, that what you're referring to when you're talking about the cleaning up of the scene. I think just for those of us who are probably a bit too silly to understand understand, what is the standard practice when it comes to securing a crime scene? Because you're not the first person to use the word cleaning up the scene before photos of evidence is taken or photos are taken. Is there a generally acceptable way that forensic photographers operate, or are they meant to capture the scene as it was, regardless of whether there is blood on the floor, there is blood on door frames? I'm not referring to this particular case necessarily, but are they meant to capture it as is, or is there a understanding that some cleaning up could take place before evidence and evidentiary photography is taken? Help me understand on the evening what should have actually happened.
Let's just jog a little bit back, Gareth. When the first responders came, it's now Matebula Mtetwa and the two trainee constables. When they arrived at the scene, Policing 101 tells you, secure the crime scene and you don't leave the crime scene until you hand it over to another police official or a forensic investigator in the employ of SAPS. You don't leave that scene. What Mteto and Matebula did was rookie. They left a crime scene unattended, drove to a hospital. I don't know to do what exactly at the hospital, but they're claiming to go and take statements there. They were supposed to remain there until there is second responders, third responders that is from the forensic team. Then they can say, okay, we're handing the scene over to you guys as forensic investigators now to actually take photos of the crime scene. And when they take photos of a crime scene, the crime scene, there should be no altering, no movement, nothing. If a crime is committed now, a shot was shot and somebody get killed, you leave everything as is. They must take the photos because they need to give a picture to the court as to how the scene looked after the crime was committed. So cleaning up, which now it seems like from the evidence and the statements that's floating around that they say Mapiri came to clean up and there were certain beer bottles that was moved and those, and that should not happen before the forensic experts has done their work and they say now we are done with the scene, we're handing it over back to the person to who it belongs. If they don't hand over the scene after they've taken their photos, you should leave everything intact. Then it's a cordon off area, you cannot enter there. And now we hear already that Kumalo's uncle was there, they found him there, which means he could have gone in. Then it's just a mess that's currently happening, and I think there was shoddy police work by the first responders.
And just very briefly, as I say goodbye to you, Elton, how pivotal is this in a court case like this? I mean, obviously, we don't want to anticipate how the court will view this. We don't want to anticipate any more evidence, but something like this could turn a court case, or am I being overly dramatic?
No, you're not overly dramatic, Gareth. That is most of the time where court cases are determined. When you say that there was interference with the evidence, the court must not, then the court is sort of half in a position not to allow that evidence to be used as to prove that a crime was committed or not. And once that evidence is out, then the court can't say beyond reasonable doubt that a crime was committed and by a specific individual. And that's where court cases are normally built on. So for me, that tampering with the evidence and the crime scene and how it was handled can have a significant bearing on if we see a guilty verdict in this case.
Elton Hart, always good to have you with us to make sense for us lay persons who don't quite understand exactly what the significance is of what the court is talking about. We can follow it, but you are, of course, here to help make the context viable in a situation like this. Elton Hart, as always, legal expert, very kind with his time here on ENCA, whether it's early mornings or late afternoons. I'm sure we'll hear from him again in the coming days. So the court adjourning for today, but as Elton says, we're now getting into the details of the photos, yes, but how the crime scene itself was managed. All right, coming up for you in just a